The last time I was on the Scratch website, I was back in junior high school, and that was before I knew how to code. I simply used the website to play games, and whenever I did eventually learn how to code, the school blocked the website. So it's been a while since I've actually coded anything on Scratch. As such, whenever I tried logging in, I couldn't log in. So I had lost my old account. But that was fine, because I was planning on creating a new account anyways. So I created Index from scratch, a new account with no projects and a blank canvas to where I could make any game that I want. So to start this 48-hour challenge, I started by playing some games myself. After all, I needed some inspiration and I hadn't been on the website in a while. Now, I was a little disappointed at what I found. It wasn't the high-notch Griffin Patch games that I remember playing back in junior high. And so, after seeing a couple of lackluster games, I figured maybe I could make a game of my own, and it could be quite decent. I have videos on this channel where I have made games previously, but nothing visual, like too visual. So this was going to be interesting, because Scratch does have a couple of limitations. Starting at 12 p.m., my 48-hour challenge began, and while I had 48 hours to work on the project, I would lose a lot of time sleeping, working, and having a life. So my end time spent working on the project ended up being only around 6 hours. I started up with a little bit more brainstorming as the inspiration hadn't truly inspired me. Now, there was a game that I really wanted to make a while ago, and so I went with that. It was going to be a top-down shooter with upgrades. The first thing that I worked on was designing a main character. Now, my original design was pretty bad, but I would eventually fix it. I started working on basic movements, and using my new knowledge from high school of cosine and sine, I was able to create a weird drift thing. There is a small glitch in the current system where going diagonally can move you faster than if you were to just go up and down, because there are limits on the X and Y change, which result in you being able to go twice the speed if you move diagonally. I would eventually fix this as well. The next part of this project that I wanted to work on was creating a scaling system where the game would gradually zoom out, and the scale variable could also be used to regulate opponent spawning. To improve the main character further, I decided to work on an engine using my particle experience that I got from Godot. I made my manual particle spawner for the main character to be triggered whenever he went forward and backwards, and using some angle regulation, I managed to make it to where it looks good going forwards and backwards, and it also left a nice little trail. Using this system, I encountered the clone part of Scratch, which came with a whole lot of bugs that I would have to later fix. However, it was very useful for the engines. And now I spent a lot of time playing with this basic movement, which is usually a good sign, but also kind of a hinder whenever you're trying to develop a game in only 48 hours. So I started working on the background zoom out, but nothing worked. I tried a lot of things, manually creating stars that zoom in and out, but the border system of Scratch simply wouldn't allow it. And after I wasted a whole lot of time working on the background zoom out, I updated the main character, and I think I like the new design a lot better. It's not as colorful as the previous design, but I think it fits the theme. And after I updated the design, I continued working on the background, yet I could not fix the scale system. So I settled on a plain background with no stars, and you would simply see the main character and enemies zooming out, and that should give the player a good reference. And with the main character, I finally decided to work on the enemies. And the design was a little bit inspired by Star Wars, if you can tell, but the coloring was very out of pocket. And now whenever I started doing the enemy design, I finally encountered the clone glitch, which ended up spawning a clone for every clone that I created. I spent a while going through forums trying to figure out a solution to this, as I had never used clones in any other projects before this one. Eventually I found a solution, and it took me a while, but I got it working. And with the enemy spawned, I decided to create a game logic sprite with a blank costume for game logic such as enemy spawn. And I also created an explosion animation for the enemy, and though it wasn't that high quality, it did the job. I simplified it and eventually started making collision detection and health for both the player and the enemy. I added knockback using the enemy direction and variable manipulation, since most variables in Scratch were global unless I had specified otherwise. I initially had player on enemy collision as well as enemy on enemy collision, but I decided that enemy on enemy collision was not necessary. I also created a hit animation for the main character, and I started working on simple bullets. I had a little bit of trouble with the angles for the bullets, surprisingly, because I thought they would be rather simple. And once I finally had the bullets, I added a hit animation for the opponent, which was a simple flash red for both the main character and the enemy. I had to use some trippy timing systems to manage the whole process, and then I spent a lot of time switching the UI design for the enemy because I simply did not like it. It was horrendous, and I eventually made it more Star Wars-like, and I still don't exactly love the design, but I am not a UI designer. And since I wasn't smart enough to download assets from the web, I would just have to deal with it. I spent a lot of time trying to refine movement, although that may have been an excuse to play the game more. I couldn't fix the diagonal speed glitch, so I simply removed the speed cap, and surprisingly that worked. The drift variable handled regulation quite well. I also switched from spacebar to Z key as the gun shooting button, and a weird interference that only allowed you to press 3 of the spacebar and arrow keys got removed. I don't know why this exists, but it got quite aggravating whenever I would be playing the game and all of a sudden the bullets would stop. So the Z key is going to be used to actually shoot. I then added a health bar, which I am quite proud of. I originally had it in the bottom center of the screen, but I moved it to the top right because I did not like how big it was. I also added a lot of polish with some glow effects that created a flickering sensation and allowed for good transitions whenever the player got hit. Text as health representation would be a bad idea because of Scratch's crummy VAR representation. And now after going through some other Scratch games, I realized that there is a way that you can use custom sprites as your text and score representation, and if I do update this game, that is something that I definitely want to implement. But I am glad that I did not attempt to do so because that would have wasted a lot of time that I did not have. And so I tried adding coins, but the costumes got in the way of the bullet collision system, since the coins that I used would have been simply switching the enemy costume to a new one. I then added simple score and high score variables to create a goal to the game, and these variables were the only two that I had to use Scratch's variable system to display. And once again, that is something that I want to fix. I then created a title screen with the high score and using Scratch's broadcast systems. This made it very easy to pause and unpause and play and end the game. Going down the final stretch, I did fix numerous bugs to finish the game in time. It did not help that I was simply addicted to the game. I then added some polish with a +1 score animation that I quite like, as these little polishes that I am able to add, such as the health bar and the +1 score animation, are what I feel will set this game apart from others. I was pleasantly pleased with the result. I then had to fix the clone bug with the +1 score animation, as well as the engine and the bullets, which all had similar problems. There were a couple of last minute visual improvements, but I was finally out of time. I planned to continue working on the game for an hour, but a last minute event that I had to attend left a couple of things unfinished. The main one was music and sound effects, but I also wanted to add the custom number system, new enemies, new weapons, and upgrades, as well as final bosses. And since I didn't have time to do any of those, I will have to leave that for a sequel challenge, which could be another 48-hour challenge, and I would love to do that. However, before fixing the game, there was something that I had to fix, and that was the sound. I'd never done sound design for a game, so this was going to be the first time. I have messed around in FL Studio a couple of times, so I was able to whip up some goofy little retro themed song. I also used Scratch's wide variety of sound effects to create a couple of decent sound effects. While I was creating all this custom sound, I let the game sit for about a day, and finally on day 4 I published the game. Let me show you the final result. So I hope you enjoyed this video and the game, which I encourage you to play at Index from Scratch on Scratch. FYI, I did eventually find my old account, but due to some very personal projects that I worked on, I think I'm gonna leave that as a mystery for you guys to solve. Originally, I thought I would leave the game up for a while, but I have a feeling that Scratch might not push it as much as I would like, seeing as it's my first project on my profile. So I'm going to upload this video and hope that it drives traffic to my Scratch profile, which will then drive traffic to my YouTube profile, and hopefully that ends up being an entire loop and gives me enough motivation to make a sequel, which I highly want to, as this is a project that I have remnants of even on my old profile. And without anything further to say, I look forward to making a sequel. I look forward to the response from all of you guys, and I will see y'all in the next video.